everyone. Oh yes, this session will be recorded.
Right, good evening, should I say. Good evening, everybody. First of all, I'd like to thank Kerry and the committee for giving me the opportunity to come and do this talk this evening. Really appreciate that opportunity. As Kerry said, I'm here to represent Port Vale Football Club this evening, and first thing I will say is I'm not going to sit here and pretend I know everything. I know there's people that are listening into this presentation, and maybe no doubt there'll be others that I'm not aware of who will know a lot more about stadium safety regarding football, rugby and other sports. But what I will do is go through the challenges we faced at Port Vale and challenges I know other safety officers have through being on the WhatsApp groups and the various EFL groups. So I know we've all faced the same challenges, but it's basically guided around what we've done at Port Vale pre-coronavirus and the impacts of the coronavirus from last March onwards. If I don't know the answer to the questions at the end, I will say I don't know the answer to the question. But what I will do is guarantee that if you leave your contact details, I will get back to you as soon as I find that answer out. Or I'm quite happy for somebody who's in this meeting to give the answer if they're able to do so. So basically, what we'll be going through is, as I said, the challenges that we faced, and for some reason my screen isn't changing. That's a good start. We've done this before and it's not working now, so just bear me a second. So much for trying it out early. Right, there we go. Right, so the safety team at Port Vale consists of quite a number of people, really. We've got the main safety officer, who is John Rutherford. And John Rutherford is a very experienced safety officer. He's worked at various football league grounds, cricket grounds, and he's got over 25 years experience in the safety sector for stadium safety. John is ably abetted by myself and John Bloor, who are both his deputy safety officers. John Bloor is ex-Staffordshire Police, and he came on board in the team around about 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago. And basically, John's taken a lot of responsibility on to support John Rutherford, where he's doing 3 days a week at the club. He's doing safeguarding as well as safety. From his police background, safeguarding was obviously a big issue, and he's got a lot of value and a lot of experience to add to that. Where I fit into it is I used to do stewarding about 25 plus years ago, spent a good many years stewarding. So I've been on the front face of it, knowing what supporters are like, especially under the influence of alcohol, and basically trying to defuse the situation and calm people down. And then about three and a half, 4 years ago, I was asked by the previous safety officer, Phil Mayer, to join him as deputy and look after the health and safety side, the policies, the procedures, and supporting him to run the stewarding team. So that's the safety team at Port Vale, but we're also got our chief stewards, our deputy stewards, and a team of stewards under us as well. So it's quite a big operation when we have match days. Some of the regulations that people might not be aware of when they go to these events, and like I say, I'm talking about elite sports, not non-league sports, because the regulations or the rules are slightly different when it's not elite sport. So like the health and safety at work act, which is always at the top of the tree with anything that we do. And then we've got the Sports Ground Safety Act, we've got the Alcohol Control of Alcohol Act, and as you can see there, quite a lot: Sports Ground, Football Spectators Child Act, and so on. the main ones for English Football League and Championship football and Premiership football are the licensing acts and things like that, where you're not allowed to drink alcohol in view of the pitch 15 minutes before the game, 15 minutes after the game. So you'll see in the hospitality boxes, they'll have blinds in the windows so they can make sure people can't watch the football whilst they're having alcohol. Obviously, that's slightly different in other sports, but for the football at the moment, that's what it is. And I don't see it changing anytime soon, but you never say never. Some of the other sports that we've got, regulations that we've got, is fire safety. Again, that's a fundamental part of any organisation, especially when we're having members of the public and people that are not aware of the surroundings and the fire exit routes and the access and egress routes. So again, quite stringent fire safety regulations. And then, as I've mentioned earlier, we've got safeguarding. We have young children, we have young adults, vulnerable adults attending these events. And obviously we need to make sure all them people are safe. Everybody comes to a football match or a sports event or a concert or whatever it is to enjoy themselves. And you've got a duty to be protected and go home safely at the end of it. And as you can see there, again, there's some regulations that we have to comply with: Equality, Sports Ground Safety Authority, asbestos regulations. If we're having work done at the stadium, we have to comply with construction design management. And then the main one last year was the coronavirus restrictions. So there's a lot that we go through there, that, as you can see. What guides all that when we're looking at football is the Green Guide, which is currently the 6th edition. There are different guides. Motorsports have a purple guide as well, but predominantly most sports, including motorsports, look at the sports, the Green Guide for guidance, and it's quite in depth. It's quite robust, and there's a lot of information to take in that you probably never will take it all in. But the key thing, as we know, as health and safety consultants, health and safety professionals and practitioners, is we need to be aware of it. We need to know where we can find the information if we have to have it, and that's the fundamental part. On my Green Guide, I've got this here that I carry with me, and as you can see, it's quite an in-depth document. So it's quite a substantial document. But it's great to have with you to make sure that if you're not sure of something, you can look it up and you can get the correct answers that you want. Probably sometimes in an emergency situation, which hopefully doesn't happen because of all the pre-checks that we do prior to the event starting. Some of the guidelines in there, as you can see, there's different sectors, different section headings. And it goes into everything. It goes into, as most guidelines do, how does the guide work? So it shows you around the guidelines. And then we're looking at calculating the safe capacity of sports grounds. What I will do later on in the slides is explain how, again, at Port Vale, we are restricted by the safety certificate, complying with the sports advisory group, local authorities, and so on. So we'll look at that in a bit when we're looking at calculating safe capacity of sports grounds. And then we've got the management responsibilities, planning for the safety. So it's the safety team. And it's also, as with any organisation, the responsibility of the directors. So even though directors appoint safety officers and safety teams, they are still in the firing line if something goes wrong. So they need to be supporting the safety officers and the safety team wherever possible, whether it's with funding, whether it's with additional resources, training, or even the facilities they're working in. So they've got a fundamental part to play in making sure the venue is safe for people to come into. Then we're looking at managing stewards, managing the structure, the installations, the structure. So looking at things like statutory inspections, electrical, gas, steel fabrication, stand safety, concourse safety. So all this has to be taken into account when they're looking at doing the safety certificate before the safety certificate is issued. And as I said, there are restrictions that are put on safety certificates. At Port Vale, it is an old stadium. It was opened in 1950s. It's had work done to it over the years, but it's not like going to somewhere like Tottenham's ground or the Emirates or somewhere like that are new or fairly new stadiums. So there's still a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of restrictions because of the condition of some parts of the ground. We're also looking at circulation, so ingress, egress, verticals, separating elements, spectator accommodation, seating, and all this has to be calculated in accordance with making sure people are safe. Then, as you can see there, again, fire safety, communication and control, and then we've got the appendices. So we've got the physical factors and we've got the safety factors. So we have to calculate them as well. So for the purpose of Port Vale, then, how the stadium is set up currently, we have our own in-house stewards for all games, and we have 10 sectors. So again, every ground's different, every ground has different setups, but at Vale Park, we have 10 sectors, which consist of the main stand, which is the railway paddock and railway stand. It is actually one stand, but we've got a wall that goes right the way across in the middle to segregate the paddock with the seating and the stand at the back. So it's one stand, but it's classed as two separate stands for the purpose of the safety certificate. Then we have the family stand, and then we've got behind the goals, we have what we call the bycars, and we've got accessibility and Lawn Street, which the Lawn Street is the main stand where all the corporate hospitality boxes are, the directors' seating areas are and everything. And then Sector 9, we have where the away supporters go, which is off the Anvil Road stand. So that's how we do our sectors at Port Vale. When we have new stewards, they're inducted, they have a steward handbook, and the steward handbook goes into where each section is. It'll have a map of the stadium. And then they're obviously having ongoing training as they go about. And this is basically the map of Vale Park, as it's known as. As I said, it is an old stadium that's had a lot of work done to it over the years, but regardless, it's still 60-odd-year-old stadium. And that's how all the sectors are broken out. So as you can see there, it's quite an in-depth stadium for a League Two football club. And it has a capacity of over 19,000 without restrictions, but we do have restrictions, unfortunately. One thing that we have to look at, though, is we are surrounded by residential properties as well, just off the Anvil Road driveway, which is the Royce Browston driveway, which is the main entrance for the main stands and the directors and so on, and the changing rooms. But we do have residence houses along there, and we also have residence houses along the back of the Lawn Street beyond the car park. So we also have to take into account residents when we're putting these events on. We are looking at different events as well, as some of you might know or not know. Robbie Williams is a big fan of Port Vale. He should have been having a concert on last June, but unfortunately, for obvious reasons, it was cancelled. But we're looking at putting that back on next June. So as you can see, as safety officers, we're not just looking at the football events, we're looking at things like pop concerts, which will have totally different dynamics, and the risk assessments that have gone into them are, as you can imagine, quite robust. We've got to look at things like having people standing in the pitch area, temporary works for the stage, the local area, the impact on the local area for travel and travel restrictions and so on. So it's not just football; it's anything that goes on at that stadium that we have to look at. So staffing on a match day, really, this is what Port Vale staffing consists of on match day. As I said, we have John Rutherford, who who is the overall responsibility for the event. His name's on the safety certificate, and unfortunately, if anything goes wrong, then John has to answer the questions as we do. If we're part of that team, there's no I in team. We all have a role to play, and we all have to make sure we're doing that role properly, safely as we can do. We also have a designated football officer from the police, which we're quite fortunate of with ourselves, that we've got a good working relationship with Staffordshire Police. And Nikki Burton, the designated football officer, is heavily involved in the club, not just on match days, but she comes in a couple of days a week and she's involved in meetings during the week. But unfortunately, she also has to look after other teams within Staffordshire, like Burton Albion and that. So obviously, her time's split between Port Vale and different other teams as well. And then what we're looking at then is we're looking at paramedic controller. We have paramedics at the events in case anybody's injured, either from spectators or from the playing team. We have a radio controller who controls all the radio waves and making sure that people are in positions on or radio contactable if need be. We have a recorder recording everything that might potentially happen, any issues, anything that we need to be aware of, that we can take to the lessons learned meeting the following week, which we have after every match. We have 2 CCTV operators controlling the cameras, control room manager. We have an administrator to make sure everything's logged and everything. We also have the luxury of 2 training officers that are dedicated just for training. So even if the stewards have been trained, we might not necessarily have the number of staff that we need. So we do work with 3 outside agencies that might consist of SIA badge stewards, normal stewards for watching spectators and so on. But all these need to be inducted as our staff do. Once they are inducted, we'll look at things like an MVQ2, where they have a bit of fire safety, bit of safety on football support and things like that. Because to be a steward, they have to be level 2 MVQ. If they're looking at deputy stewards or stand managers or sector leaders, then they have to be level 3 MVQ. So people that are in them positions or going for them positions have the ongoing training with the training officers as well. And then for the deputy safety officers and safety officers, we are all MVQ level 4. Which is a requirement for a safety officer. So there's a lot of training that goes on behind the scenes as well, and it's constant, whether it's safeguarding, whether it's spectator safety, COVID, police incidents, whatever it is, we have to make sure we're on top of that. Approximately, we have about 80 stewards working on the events as well on match days, and then we also have the catering staff for all the refreshment bars. So as you can see there, for any match day, we potentially looking at 300 staff, which, as you can see, is probably a big task when a lot of these people are only there on match days. They've got other jobs that they do on a day-to-day basis. So you can see it's quite laborious pulling all these people together. So we try to make sure we keep a consistent team, because if we keep having new staff every match, then it's a thankless task for everybody. When we're looking at the stewards, as with anything, we have to comply with guidelines. We have to look at guidelines, and these are sort of the guidelines that we are working to. So 1 steward per 250 attendees if it's a low risk event. So as an example, at Port Vale, League 2 football club doesn't necessarily generate a lot of away supporters. So if we were having a Tuesday night match with somebody from 300 miles away, probably Colchester or somebody like that, Plymouth, chances are it'd be a low risk event. But if we were playing Stoke City in the Cup, who are 5 miles away from one another, let's say we've got an history where the supporters don't get on with one another, even though they might be working together every day, or even in some cases from the same families. But as soon as they attend a Port Vale Stoke City game, that's when the rivalry kicks in. So we look at that as an iris. So we'd be looking at 1 steward per 100 attendees as a minimum. We'd have more police involved, and other people from outside resources as well. So that's what we need for the attendances. That's the number of stewards we need. When we're doing the briefings, what we're looking at is anything up to 50 stewards, we might do 1 briefing. So we'll have everybody together in one of the concourses. We'll do the briefing, which goes into any banning orders that we're aware of, any police spotters that will be at the ground to spot for home and away supporters that are known to them. Anything that the stewards might need to know regarding safety for the stadium that might have changed during the event, between events, anything from the board or anything like that. So we'll go through all that with 1 briefing. Anything over 50 stewards, we cascade the briefings down. So we'll split them into probably 4 or 5 different groups, and then we'll go through it, where you'll probably have myself, the other deputy safety officer, John, chief steward, the deputy steward, and probably one of the training stewards giving the briefings. And then the other thing we're looking at is the number of turnstiles that we normally have to operate. So we probably average between 4,500 and 5,500 spectators on a normal league game. So we understand where predominantly most of them sit in within the stadium, what turnstile staff we need, and we're also looking at the 660 persons per entry per hour. I don't know about the other safety officers on here, but I know from experience that you will get people probably just start dripping in to the stadium within the first hour, which is when the turnstiles open. Turnstiles always open an hour before the planned kick-off. But unfortunately, the majority of people start turning up 15 minutes, 10 minutes, or even 5 minutes before the kick-off, and then start probably complaining because they can't get into the stadium and the actual game is kicked off. But, you know, we can only work with what we've got, and we have to make sure everybody's safe. So, you know, we take time, we make sure everybody gets through the turnstile safely, and everybody's safety is taken care of. So I briefly mentioned earlier on about the physical and the safety factors, and these are the things that we're looking at when we're looking at the constraints that are put on as a club for the safety certificate. For valid reasons, as I said, you know, we can't have spectators sitting in areas of the stadium that are deemed unsafe. So unfortunately, we have to cordon them areas off, or even close the entire stand down if need be. But the physical factor is the condition that's required to be followed when we're calculating reductions for any safety issues. And then the safety requirements is considered dictates resources required for the event and pre-event inspections and recording of them. So again, part of the pre-match assessments that we have to do for every single match or event that we have on at the stadium, we have to do pre-event risk assessments. We have to do 48-hour checks, 24-hour checks, the day of the event checks. And then also when the stewards are deployed after the briefing, they have to do a sweep of their areas as well for checking for anything like suspect packages, anything that's unsafe and things like that. So as you can see, it's a constant ongoing thing, and the physical and safety factor all comes into that as well. So when we're calculating the capacity, the safety of the crowd, we're considering the guidelines of 5 people per square metre at the upper level, and then standing and viewing spaces. Port Vale as all-seating stadium, there's no standing at our stadium, hasn't been for a good number of years now. So we don't have standing areas. I know some league clubs do, and I know clubs in other sports do as well. and we can have what we call safety standing and things like that that will all go into the calculations when we're looking at the safety for the crowd. So we're calculating the capacity of the venue where the sports event, including members of the public, are considered as part of the football club. And that also includes directors, staff, match day staff, and everybody who's actually in the stadium for that event. So all events, we have casual staff, we have security staff, we have ticketing, we have stewards. So at Port Vale, for instance, match day staff, we potentially, as I've said, have over 300 staff. That's catering, security, stewards, paramedics, police, bar staff. We have our own pub on the away car park called Tommy Cheadle's, and that's open for home and visiting supporters. So we have to have door supervisors on the doors, checking people, making sure, obviously, you know, people are enjoying a drink without any trouble. If they want cigarettes, they're told to where to go for the designated smoking areas and so on. What we're looking at currently is the maximum capacity of 14,414 supporters at Port Vale, including a away team. And that's the established capacity for the ground in accordance with the safety certificate. And this is how it's broken down. So we have to really dig down into everything. So Lawn Street, as you can see there, 1,560, accessibility stand, which is designated purpose-built accessibility stand. You've got perspex screens in front of them to protect them from the weather conditions. Each spectator has got a seating area for wheelchair access, and also a seat for the person who is coming along to the event with them as well. We've got accessibility toilets, refreshment bars, and so on. And we also have accessibility parking right at the back of the stand as well. So we'd like to think that the people who require the use of that are well catered for. The Amel Road stand, which is for the away supporters only, it's not segregated half and half, so there's no home stewards in that stand whatsoever. That is solely for away supporters, and that allows up to 4,550. And then, as you can see, without going into them all, each of the other stands have got the calculations already worked out, and we've got 755 capacity for the hospitality stands and so on. Unfortunately, though, all this, as we all know, overnight came to a grinding halt in March last year. Carol Shanahan, the chairperson for Port Vale, was part of the EFL League Two discussions on whether the season should be altered or not, which was a really odd decision for Carol, because Port Vale were 1 point off the playoff place, but quite rightly, she took the decision that the season did need to be altered for the safety of everybody. And it was a time where none of us knew what was happening. You know, we were heading into our first lockdown and so on. So it all came to the grinding halt, really, not knowing what the impact was going to be, as none of us did. And just basically listening to UK government updates from the World Health Organization, Public Health England, and also the local public health departments as well. So everything changed overnight. And what we did then, we went from 300 staff on a match day down to 15. When the season did kick in again at the beginning of the last season, we played behind closed doors, and we had about 15 stewards, and that included the control room. But we did probably have about 100 people attending the event. So we had directors still attending, we had the playing staff and the coaching staff, and we also had the media. But we had to put restrictions in place. So people had to wear masks, people had to social distance, they had to follow one-way systems. Had to scan in on the QR codes. They had to have the temperatures checked. The playing staff and the Port Vale staff, we had to, and we still do have lateral flow tests twice a week, and if need be, even more times than that. But that was what we put in place as soon as we had to. And this is what we were looking at when we were looking at the match day build-up and the COVID protocol. So for every single match, we had to provide a specific COVID risk assessment for that event. So we had to know names of people who were coming in from the media, any directors, guests, any coaches from other teams or scouts from other teams. And obviously there was a restriction on numbers. So unfortunately, if there was already too many people on that list and that was the capacity, anybody else wasn't allowed to attend the event. We had to do match official information sheets, media information sheets, making them all aware of what the COVID protocols were, the no-go areas, what they could do and what they couldn't do. The away team had to provide their information sheet, excuse me. So they had to sign a declaration form before they actually even travel to our stadium, basically saying that their playing staff and coaching staff that were coming to the event had received lateral flow tests. They got no cases of COVID or anybody with COVID symptoms, and they had to sign the declaration form to do that. We had special police services that we had to take into consideration. So we had police assessments, safeguarding for the spectators that were in the stadium, which, as I said, was probably a maximum of 100. And then again, going through match day checks as we would, recording any illnesses at the games, collating match day documentation. And then what we do with the match day documentation, which tells us what the weather was like, how many people were attending the event, were there any issues and that. All that is then put on the football safety officer's authority match reports, and it's all logged on there as well, as other football league clubs do the same. And as I said, the away team also have to provide their information as well. Now, this slide is showing basically some of the challenges we were facing. This is just one example of sketches from my notebook that I was carrying around, because the goalposts kept changing, to be fair. As a lot of you who are safety officers and events organisers will know, what you might have been able to do the night before you went to sleep, you might not been able to do the following morning. So it was ever-changing process, really, and we kept coming up with different ideas, and obviously every time we were coming up with the different ideas, we were looking at things like social distancing, wearing the masks and things like that. So some of the things I was looking at as part of my role in the team is I was looking at things like access and egress routes, one-way systems, seating arrangements. So, you know, where people in bubbles, do we need to put 2 seats together? Do we have to miss so many seats? And we were basing that on the guideline of a seated person, a 1.5 metre isolation zone around them. So anybody that wasn't in their bubble had to be sitting at least 1.5 metres away. And that's why in some cases we were looking at doing a row and missing a row and so on. We were looking at how we can probably dot them around so people weren't sitting directly in front or behind somebody else. And, you know, it was different areas that we were looking at. But as I said, as soon as we did that, then, you know, something else came out where we had to really look at that. Again, these are the things that we were looking at doing from the government and the EFL guidelines. So stage 1 was return to training guidance. So as I said, everything went into lockdown. So the playing staff and everybody basically were told to go home and wait for further guidance. Football stopped. But when we got to a stage where players could come back, there was protocols in place that they had to follow regarding negative testing, they had to take their training kit home and wash it themselves. They had to take the kit that they played in home and wash it themselves. They weren't allowed to do what they normally do and throw it in the laundry room. The kit man wasn't allowed to wash it, and so on and so on. So they even had to turn up to training at designated time slots in smaller groups. They had to turn up with the training kit on, and they had to leave the stadium with the training kit on. So that was stage one. Stage two along similar lines, but probably with a few more players in the group. And then we looked at stage three. So we looked at return to domestic competition guidance. So return to the Football League matches and what we needed to do for that. Unfortunately, that kept being put back where we weren't allowed to have spectators in. And then return of competition for safe return of competitors, which was the stage 5. And that was all through the government and the EFL guidelines. At Port Vale, we were planned to do some test events, but unfortunately for changes in circumstances and that, they never materialised. So for us, from last March, we haven't had any spectators in until last night when we had a pre-season friendly with Sheffield Wednesday, and there was 2,500 so spectators in that ground, and that consisted of also 560 Sheffield Wednesday fans as well. So we went from behind closed doors events for about 16 months to chaos last night, to say that we all had to learn again, and not just us but spectators. People had to be made to feel safe. Terracing. So method one, we had different options and the guidelines of what we could look at. So method one was a 1 meter circle, centre of head for somebody sitting, standing or walking. Method two was 1.5 meter circle of sitting and 1.6 meter circle of standing or walking. Then we had to look at the methods for the routes. So less than 1.6 meter width, we had to make it a one-way system. And method two, if it was less than 2.2 meters width, it had to be a one-way system. Method one, 72 persons per minute on a level surface, 52 if they had to ascend or descend steps. And then method two, 46 persons per minute. So as you can imagine from that, not just Port Vale, but a lot of football safety officers and safety officers that we spoke to all plumped for method one on the way to do it. Also, the updates that we came through. This was an email that I made a note of that we received on the 25th of February, and that was to say the aim for spectator return was 17th of May. And indoor events, 1,000 people or 50% of the venue capacity, whatever there was the lowest, or 50% or 4,000 if it was outdoor capacity. And again, unfortunately, 70th of May came and went, and that was put back as well. So we had to look at risk assessments and everything again for COVID. Again, some of the things that I was looking at, some other different options, one-way routes, access points, where people had to wear masks, how many people we could get in each area, which gates we could use, and so on. So that's just another example of some of the calculations that were actually being worked on by the whole of the team. And then this is just basically an overview of Vale Park. So it's quite a big ground for the league we're in. But one thing we had to do was on the area where it says Academy building, right at the bottom of that, we had to stop away teams from using the away team changing room because of the red zone. Because how it's situated at Port Vale, the home team dressing room and the away team dressing room are basically across the corridor from one another. So to make sure that we weren't putting more people in that area that we had to, we utilised the academy building. And what we did then, we allowed the away team players and staff to park on car park C, which is normally the away supporters car park. And then they utilised the use of the academy building for getting prepared for the game. And then what they had to do then is we had two designated stewards that made sure the room was set out socially distanced, seating wise. Everything was taken care of, sanitised, deep cleaned, and so on. And then one of the stewards basically chaperoned the team through the Amel Road concourse and down the steps onto the pitch behind the goal. So it was completely segregated right the way through till the pre-season friendly we had against Nottingham Forest a couple of weeks ago, where we did allow them to start using the away changing rooms again, although we have made changes to the layout and we've put some partition walls up to segregate them more than they were before. Coming to a conclusion now, this is the last slide really, before taking any questions, but this is what we had to do regarding red zones, amber zones and green zones. And key personnel, people like myself and playing staff and that, we had to have these passes. So anybody without a red zone pass was not allowed anywhere within any of them red zones. Even the safety officers, although obviously we have to be aware of everything that's going on, when there was a match on, the only time we were allowed to go beyond the reception area, if I just show you, as you can see, a lot of the red zone there is the away changing room, the home changing room, the tunnel, the physio's office, medical room, and the gym, and so on. The only time we were allowed to go into them areas on a match was if there was a situation that needed our attendance, whether it was an emergency situation and so on. Then the amber zones were for people that were designated them, so people like stewards, media, and so on. And then the green zones are outside the footprint of the stands and so on. So that's the car parks and the access routes and so on. But again, we have to still consider them because we have the local people to consider as well. So that's it from me. I'll stop sharing. And hopefully be able to answer any questions, or like I said before, if I can't, I'll ask the committee to take your details and I'll give you the answers when I find them.
All right, thank you very much, Darren. Fascinating, isn't it, really? And such a huge amount of time between last, sort of into March and now to not have had any, events really and matches. It's just beyond, it really is, isn't it, for business, let alone the people. It's to keep your business alive. So that's fascinating stuff. So there are some questions. So Scott has asked, if health and safety professional was thinking about getting involved as a safety officer with a local club, do they contact them directly? Or, how is it broached, really, I think, is his query.
Yeah, definitely. Like I say, depending on what level the local club is, there are different, as I said, different regulations, different requirements. Normally for a football league club, as I mentioned earlier, stewards have to be MVQ level 2, chief stewards MVQ level 3. But for the safety officers, if you're going for a deputy safety officer role, which would be the first point of call, you'd be expected to be working towards an MVQ level 4 at some point for spectator management safety. Because if you end up being a safety officer, it's your name that goes on the safety certificate as well as the chairperson. But in answer to the question, yeah, we all have to start off somewhere. All clubs welcome people, people support and so on. So yeah, just contact the club. I'm sure they'll welcome you and advise you on what they've got available, what steps to take. They might ask you to, take on a steward role first to get, an insight into what the stewards have to do, and then, work your way up from there. But it depends on the club. Unfortunately, because of what's happened in the last 12 months, and again, the safety officers on here that might be able to tell you as well, but unfortunately, there are safety officers that probably have decided not to come back into the profession, and because they haven't been going to matches every Saturday, they probably found other things to do, with family and so on. So, I'm not saying there is a shortage of safety officers, but I know there's opportunities out there for the people with the right credentials to do so.
Excellent. Great, thank you, Dan. And another question from Kieran Delaney. What protocols did Port Vale introduce to accommodate people like myself who are medically exempt from wearing face coverings, but who wanted to attend a fixture? How is that broached?
That's a good question, that is, because like I say, we had spectators in for last night's event, which was the first one we had with spectators since March. And the answer to that is, what we've put in at Port Vale, all our stewards who are front facing, i.e. Dealing with spectators, have to wear face covering, even though spectators, it's their choice now. But we've put it in for the safety of our stewards and the safety of spectators that they have to wear a mask. There are people who are exempt. So the stewards that are exempt have got the medical lanyards that say they're exempt for, whether it's COPD or asthma or what have you. And as long as they've got them lanyards on, then they don't have to wear the mask, but they have to be wearing them lanyards. When it comes to spectators, since the latest changes that happened with the government a couple of weeks ago, there's no restrictions really with spectators. Spectators choose whether they want to wear them or not. It was quite funny last night because we do ask people to make sure they take care of people's safety and consider other people. So, we do ask them to wear masks if they want to, or at least respect people who do want to wear masks. But social distancing, that again, there's nothing that we need to enforce them with them now. But it was quite funny last night that we had Sheffield Wednesday fans in, and the queue for the refreshment bar virtually went right the way down the concourse. And it wasn't because of the number of people queuing up, it was because they all automatically queued up at a socially distanced in a socially distanced pattern, which was nice to see. So the answer to the question is, if they're medically exempt as match day staff, then as long as they've got the lanyard, they don't need to wear a mask. Spectators choose whether they want to or not.
Right, okay, that's great. Thank you very much for that. Right, another question then is, how were the police integrated into the stadium safety measures? Which you've touched on, haven't you, for your team and police, but in the wider aspect of policing?
Yeah, but what normally happens is, as I said, we have a designated football officer who in our instance is a lady called Nikki Burton, WPC. Her role within the police is solely for Burton Albion and Port Vale. So all her time is based at Staffordshire headquarters at Stafford, or at Port Vale Stadium or Burton Albion Stadium. And basically what she's doing, she's doing intelligence work. So she's liaising with the designated football officer for whoever the visiting team's going to be at the next event. They're looking at history between the two sets of supporters, so has there been any issues of banning orders or people that have been to court. They're making sure that stewards and safety officers are aware of any banning orders for visiting supporters. So again, we're looking on cameras. The police officers are within the stadium footprint looking out for them. And basically that's what the designated football officer does, as well as any other intelligence and supporting the local authority in that as well. In addition to that, they do have silver commanders and gold commanders and so on as well. So, you know, there's quite a lot of involvement from the place. But what I will say, and I don't know if it's the same for everywhere, I'm sure it is, but within the confines of that football stadium or rugby stadium or wherever it is, when that event's on, the safety officer has ultimate responsibility. So it's the safety officer that makes the call, and the police comply with what the safety officer is telling.
Yeah, well, it has to, yes. That's great. Thank you. I wanted to touch on the question for myself, really. You talked about other types of events potentially in that. How will your planning and operations in that vary for those types of events, because they are literally like a loose cannon potential, can't they? You know, how on earth are you going to approach that?
Luckily, as I said, we're quite fortunate. We've got John Rutherford on board, and he's not my dad, and he hasn't paid me to keep praising him. So, it's not for that reason. You know, he genuinely has got 26 years of a lot of experience in cricket and football safety and a lot of other events. So the answer to the question is, John has also already done events like pop concerts and things like that at other venues he's worked at. And the actual organising of the event for the Robbie Williams concert, which is the one that should have gone ahead last June, that started taking place well over 12 months in advance of that. And again, as you can imagine, what we were looking at, we were liaising with public transport in the local area, so the public, the railway, the buses and so on. The local shops, the local highways. So everybody had to be involved in that. Local residents we had to look at, and that's just before we even get to inside the venue. Then we're looking at things like temporary stages. So we're looking at temporary works coordinating, temporary works designing, because how we're doing it for the Robbie Williams venue concert is the actual stand is going to be the full length of the railway paddock. So basically it's going to be the length of the pitch. So as you can imagine, it's going to be quite a substantial stage, which needs a lot of designing aspects to it. And then the added risks are, again, people who aren't probably aware of the venue, never been to the football game, different demographics of people that are being involved. We're going away from people who attend the football event for every home match to young girls, young lads, parents with young children, families. So obviously there's different risks involved. There's a lot more safeguarding involved and so on. So it's a long process where, you know, local authorities, police, as I said, local transport, and everybody plays a part of that, and it's quite a substantial undertaking.
Oh, yes, not for the faint-hearted. No, that's great. Thank you. Okay, that's any more questions from anyone to open the floor at all? So if there are any more. I think that's the questions at the moment. Then obviously, yes, we'll put out, and Darren's contact is on LinkedIn anyway, aren't you, Darren? And you're available to contact directly, aren't you? So that'll be great. There's often questions a couple of days later that wish I'd asked that one. So I appreciate that from you, Darren, and your time tonight. And all the arrangements to lead to this. So appreciate it. Thank you very much.
I enjoyed it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. No problem at all.
Yes, thank you, Darren. That was enlightening presentation showing that safety yet again pervades everything that we do, and it's not to be forgotten that when we attend events, whether it's a football match, a rugby match, athletics, or a pop concert, there are people behind the scenes making sure that we are safe attending and safe getting home again. Thank you.
Very much. Right, so that's at the close. Obviously, the recording will go onto the microsite for our branch when Paul has sorted that out. So it'll be available for you to listen to again. If I'm understanding it right, then Scott, our next session then is 22nd of September, as you said.
That's great. Yeah. Yep.
Great. And that's Colin Dodd. So yeah, another fascinating session. So we look forward to that. And everyone, branch, enjoy the summer. All the rest of it, hopefully, we get. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for attending. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and we look forward to seeing you at other events that we have coming up in the autumn. Thank you.
Okay.